Welcome to the Beats from the True Wellness Center. I'm your host, Kelly Kennedy. And the Beats is truly from my heart to yours to help you empower and inspire you to learn how the body actually does work. I am bringing you my friends, my colleagues, the most incredible minds from around the world that I have been able to learn from, and I want to share them all with you. So that's what the Beats is really about, is teaching people what I've been able to learn about how the body works and trying to give that to you in a very simple and practical way to give you things to change your life, because you got this. This is all about you and having the ability to heal your own body from within. And that's really my message, is from my heart to yours. Welcome to the Beats. Welcome to learning how your body works, and welcome to opening your heart. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your time and your attention as we focus in on this week's episode of The Beats. I set the attention today and the focus and gratitude. I appreciate Robert so much reaching out to us and sharing his gifts, his enlightenment, his wisdom with this community, wanting to be a part of this. I so bring him into the circle for the Fascia Chronic Pain Summit, and really set the attention that we stay in the flow state today, that all the words verbally and non-verbally that come through us are exactly what everybody needs to hear, that in this audience, and helping them share this out with the world, making fascia a frontline conversation over the year of 2024. That is our attention, that Robert's work is highlighted to get people to understand all the multi-complexities and yet the simplicity of working with the fascia, and that we get to know each other today and allow our community to get to know us as we stay truly heart-centered and with a focused attention, knowing that the innate intelligence is the only thing that heals. And we remain very humbled and present to the fact that we simply facilitate this innate intelligence, and that our job is to lead others to their own innate wisdom and their own best physician inside their body, and that they have this, they got this, and that we simply are able to facilitate that. We remain in gratitude, because this is a lot of fun, and fascia is a lot of fun. And we are so excited that this information is going to help relieve so much pain and agony for people and allow them to live the love and the joy of what we are meant to live in this life. And so it is. Welcome to the Beats with Kelly Kennedy. And I am so honored today to have Robert Libbey, as you just heard in that intention, join us. Robert has reached out to us because he knows so many of us on the Chronic Pain and Rescue Summit, like Gil Headley, who's one of my new bestest friends. I love Gil Headley. Oh my God, he's amazing. And wanted to contribute to what this community was here to understand. And Robert's written books. He's a authority about this in Canada. And one of the things I wanted to talk to him about, as much of his wisdom, is the amount of education that it takes and the difference. And there are great, beautiful practitioners all around the world, but I just want everybody to understand education, how it's different, and how we all format ourselves as practitioners as we lean in to get more and more education to develop into this person that we are today. So without further ado, Robert, thank you for joining us from Canada and educating us about the fascia. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I greatly appreciate the time that you guys are taking out of your lives to be here, to listen to the podcast, watch the videos. I reached out because I saw a need and I wanted to contribute. And this is what we do. We serve people that are in dysfunction and discomfort, and I had to be a part of it.
That's and as I said to Robert before we started this, like, that's amazing about what we do about this work. Like, when you're truly heart-centered and open, and what you can attract, and when your mission is clear, as Siobhan's and mine was for this Fascia Summit, is we want to give people the keys to unlock how they're stuck. And what I know in the 20 years that I've been doing this work is that if you aren't looking at the fascia, then you're going to stay stuck, because you got to unstick that, so to speak. And I've just been so gifted, and in such immense gratitude since we started this project for what has been unwinding in my life, pun intended, and what has been blooming in my life, and what has been expanding in my life, because that's what opening our fascia does. It allows us to expand. So tell us about your work. You are an RMT, which in Canada is a registered massage therapist, which can you talk about the difference a little bit, how many hours that takes, and then go from there? Not that you need the credibility. I just found it super freaking interesting versus what it is in the States.
Sure. Yeah. In Canada, we have a number of provinces that are regulated provinces. We have registered massage therapists that we practice in these provinces. On average, the educational requirements to become a registered massage therapist in Canada is 2,400 to 3,000 hours. We are covered under the Regulated Health Professions Act of Canada, so we are regulated health professionals. We receive a ton of referrals from medical doctors for everything from post-surgery to motor vehicle accidents to sports injuries to autoimmune disorders to just, general stress and tension. I treat a number of, my practice is pretty varied, much like everybody else's is. I've treated, children, infants, elite level Olympic athletes, grandmas wanting to pick up their kids, full contact gardeners, full contact knitters,
Full contact gardeners and
full contact
I'm
full
not sure
contact
what that is.
gardeners.
What's a full contact gardener?
I've got these ladies that it's going to be nice on Saturday, but it's going to rain on Sunday, so we got to go out from 8 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock in the evening, and we got to
Oh,
plant all the flowers, and we got to do all the bending and the twisting and the lifting and the things,
okay.
and it's just right. And I gotta tell you, those ladies, those full contact gardeners, they come in worse sort of feelings than my ultimate fighting championship fighters do,
Yeah,
right? So yeah, I call it full contact gardening because
that's
it,
hysterical.
it's it
It
they
is.
they they beat themselves up with
Yeah,
these things. So
yeah, you.
um yeah, that's basically it in for massage therapy in Canada. 24 to 3,000 hours, 2,400 to 3,000 hours, regulated health professionals.
So there's three things that came out for me in that. One is I just want everybody to know, in the states, depending upon your state, it's different. It can be anywhere from 300 to 1,000 hours.
Yeah.
Most, I'd say it's between 600 and 800 hours, and I would say the average is 600 hours.
Yeah.
I don't have any issues with that. I think massage therapists are very well trained at 600 hours. But what I found starkly different when he said it was when I was in the car accident 25 years ago, no, 28 years ago. Holy cow, I'm old. Older. I'm older. 28 years ago. Wow, I've never said that before. When I was in the car accident, for 3 years, I looked for different answers, and it was a friend of mine. I was at Cornell. It was like, oh, you should go see a massage therapist, and I blew him off. I was like, a massage therapist? How's that going to help me? The orthopedic specialist, the pain specialist, the neurologist, the support group I'm going to. Nobody talked about massage therapy. And when I finally went to see Donna, she taught massage at the Finger Lakes School of Massage in Ithaca, New York. She was amazing. It was the first sign of relief I'd had in 3 years, and I lived and eat and breathed by those weekly massages because it took
Mhm.
a little bit of the pain away, and it was a little relief for a shortened amount of time. And I was in a motor vehicle accident, which is how I was in the car accident. So my lawyer was trying to get my massages paid for,
Mhm.
and it was impossible. And when you said that when we first spoke, I was like, isn't that interesting? What a stark contrast that you are getting referrals from the doctors, and I couldn't get my insurance company to pay for the one thing that helped me. And honestly, I'm happy about it because it sparked something in me. It started the fire that now we call Kelly Kennedy of going, wait a second. My father had Hodgkin's disease, cancer 7 times. You'll pay for all those treatments. You'll pay for all the chemo, radiation. He's dead now at 55. I'm 23 years old. I finally found something that helps me, and you're not willing to pay for it? And it's not the neurologist, the pain specialist, the orthopedic specialist, or all the other support groups I was going to. It was for something that physical touch. And then same with the herbs, Chinese herbs. A year after that, when I was finally introduced to that, and that started to take the throb away. And then a year after that, when I was introduced to Ian Kennedy, who does all this emotional release technique that further helped me relieve my pain. None of that was paid by insurance. Yet that's what helped me. And so I'm not saying socialized medicine is the answer either. I'm just saying there's something wrong, and this is a broken model, and please wake up and realize that this change is glaring at you. It's glaring at all of us, and there is real help out there for you if you are in chronic pain. And your first line should be your body worker that understands and has continued their education to understand how much they are affecting the physiology as well as the energetics of the body, and what they are able to allow the body to let go of, to allow the body to heal.
Yep. In Canada, the system's got its own challenges, just like every other country in the world. It's not a perfect system. The nice thing currently in British Columbia, where I'm at in Vancouver, is we have the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia. They automatically cover the first 12 treatments for post-motor vehicle accident injuries. And then with medical referrals, they will continue care as long as we're attempting to regain function in the patient's life. So it's automatic here, which is just absolutely awesome. I have a patient I have treated for the last 28 years. And I saw her yesterday for the first time in a month, and she had a motor vehicle accident, and she fractured her sternum on the steering wheel.
Ugh.
And this is what we treat. This is what I teach. So,
And
and you hit it right off the bat when you were talking about the blending of, or the combination of manual therapy, physical contact. The one thing that massage therapists have an amazing ability for, we have an amazing opportunity with our patients, because typically we see our patients for half an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. That's a lot of time that we have. Now, we're not counselors, we're not psychiatrists, we're not psychologists, but we can communicate with positive terminology, with narratives or stories about the body that build the patient up. We can influence thoughts, beliefs, and expectations of the patients. For example, I've got patients that have seen other practitioners, and those practitioners, they make their patients feel broken. You need to be fixed. You're a car. Your wheel alignment is out. You've got a flat tire or something. And that's not how we communicate in our office. For example, the term scar. A lot of patients have a lot of negative thoughts, beliefs, and expectations and narratives around the term scar. I treat a lot of female patients that have had a number of different surgeries, cancer surgeries, abdominal surgeries, C-sections, mastectomies, various kinds. And I sort of reframe the term scar, and I reframe what SCAR stands for. And to me, SCAR stands for strong, capable, adaptable, and resilient.
oh, strong, capable, adaptable, resistance,
Resilient.
resilient. Okay.
So when you frame it that way, and you have the narrative that you want scars, you want adhesions, they're amazing things, they hold things together, they stop all the little bits from falling out.
Oh, what a good reframe. What a great reframe.
Right. So just again, like, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm staying in my lane as my regulated health profession dictates.
Yeah.
But the conversations and the terminology are a lot more positive.
Well, and that was the second thing I wanted to unpack from what you said, was that my massage therapist, that first woman, Donna, helped me more than anybody did until I met Ian, my emotional guru, who's not my husband, by the way. But what was impressive to me about what you said originally was I am sure that you've seen a much different variety of cases than the typical massage therapist see in the States, because you are seen as a true allied health professional that is dealing with such depths of and breadth. The type of cases you see is very different because you're being referred by all these other allied medical professionals. Where in the United States, unfortunately, massage, unless it's a medical massage and you've been in an MVA and they give you a certain amount to do now, different than in 92 when I was in the accident. But it's very different. I would say most people look at as massage as like, oh, that's what I get when I'm at the spa. And that's like, oh, a girls' weekend. I want to go treat myself. Whereas Ian and I have paid for my mother to get a massage once a month for like, I don't even know, 10 years. Because I firmly believe, I mean, she's dealing with grief. How is she going to heal unless she's touched? And I don't live close and my brothers don't live close. And I know that if you are not in contact with another human being and you don't physically get touched from them, that physiological upgrade you get is deficient and you're going to not thrive. And so we wanted her to have that more than anything. And I look at it as completely therapeutic. It's a necessity. I feel like massage is a necessity for people, not a luxury.
Yeah, patients, I think patients on in both countries and globally um have really started advocating for themselves, and they recognize that there is sort of a deficiency in healthcare globally, and that they really do need to search out for the solution that works for them. With some people, it's physiotherapy. Some people, it's active rehabilitation. A lot of people, it's massage therapy. It's touch therapy. They just find a benefit to it, and that can be for patients with all different types of injuries or pathologies. There might be some things. There's some old myths and trends in medicine that we still deal with up here, where for example, my patient with the sternum fracture, the physician said, oh, well, don't do anything for the first 2 weeks, don't have your massage therapist touch it or anything. Meanwhile, we have current evidence informed research that shows that, you want to actually work with that condition when it's in the acute phase. We actually, as manual therapists, have the most impact in acute conditions. Once it's chronic, it's so hard to work with.
Yeah.
But we can influence it so much easier in acute that can just have far better outcomes long term. So
And
I think we're both dealing with that on both sides of the fence.
yeah, I would agree. And globally, I just want people to understand how it's looked at different, because I think that we all get into our own perspectives and our own microcosms. We think it's just one way and it's this way and it's all the way this way. And I travel the world. I'm fortunate to travel the world and meet practitioners from all over the world. And it's very interesting how different, like in Europe, fascia is the first thing they look at, by the way. I mean, fascia is taught in all the medical schools, it's in all the books. All the experts are in Europe. And I've known about fascia for 20 years. I'm sure. How long you been doing this, Robert?
28.
28 years.
Yep.
God bless your soul and all the people that you've helped and continue to help. And I mean, fascia was just, it was like lymph. I didn't think this wasn't something people didn't know about until, and even in terrain medicine, I just spoke last weekend at the BRMI event, and I was so pleased that we had like 70 doctors there. But no, I take that back. We had 70 professionals there. We had medical doctors, we had chiropractors, we had licensed acupuncturists, we had light workers, we had clairvoyants, we had nutritional consultants that do nothing but virtual practice, and everybody works together to learn this medicine, to understand that it's all the parts. It's all the parts, and we need all the parts to work in unison so that we can really truly help people unwind their cases. And my most, for me, the most important thing that I did, the slide, was to get everybody to reframe that if you're not looking at the fascia and the lymph, you're not really looking at the terrain. And we do terrain medicine. And like, how are you dealing with the terrain if you're not working in the fascia and the lymph? And that's why Siobhan and I were like, when after she did the lymph summit, and I didn't know Siobhan before the lymph summit, I was just like, what do you mean somebody's doing a lymph summit? I should do a lymph summit. I'm the lymph queen. Why am I not doing the lymph summit? And like you, I was reach out last minute. I was like, Siobhan, how can I help about the lymph summit? Because you're right. Nobody knows about the lymph. Let's do this. And I quickly wrote a book for her and we put it out in the world. And I was happily pleased, Robert, with the reception of the lymph. And then literally I called her a couple months later. I was like, so what do you think about doing a fascia summit? Because the fascia is the next subject that everybody needs to talk about. And she's like, I'm too busy. I'm like, I know, me too. But let's do it anyway, because this needs to happen. And this is why this is so important. And for me, that's why I said the next 100 episodes are about fascia, because there's so much to understand. And as my previous guest, Kat, mentioned, if you understand the fascia, you understand everything. Do you not feel that way, Robert?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot more, it's a bigger part than what people think and what they used to think.
Yeah.
Surgeons used to cut it away and throw it on the floor.
Oh,
They used to think that it was packing material.
yeah.
Now we know that it's innervated, it's vascularized, it has mechanoreceptors that relay balance, coordination, kinesthetic awareness, interoception. It's basically the way that I look at the human body is not separate systems, although they teach the separate systems in medical school just to learn it. But really, this asymmetrical nonlinear feedback system is just a bunch of different tissues with different densities and specific functions.
That's all communicating together
Yeah.
and held together by what? Fascia.
Space.
Space
Space. There's lots of space between molecules.
and pressure.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep. Pressure gradient differences between the thoracic cage and the abdominal cage and the pelvic bowl, all different pressures.
And then the other, thank you. This is just your intro. I cannot even wait to see where this goes. The last thing I wanted to unpack was the overuse, because I think that is such a poignant thing that people need to understand. So I was well, I was happy, I was in no pain after I met Ian and handled my emotions. And one of the things he said to me is, you need to go find joy. You don't have any joy in your life. You're all focused on this. I was like, okay. So I tried calligraphy and I was like, I can't do calligraphy because I'm holding the calligraphy pen like this. And then I was like, oh, I'll try this next thing. And everything I tried, I was noticing my repetitive motion, my fascia didn't like it. I have a level of intensity, I admit. However, it was like I couldn't find anything that was balanced. I'm a rower. Okay. Rowing does not denote symmetry, unless you're on an erg, but I like rowing in boats. Okay,
Yep.
so that doesn't work. So then I looked at, I mean, it's just yoga was the thing that I got to, but I was like, that's not really, like, it's not exercise because I do it from the breath of yoga, but it allows symmetry. And I
Mhm.
find that that was bringing me joy. But now that your book is so funny that I didn't know your book existed, because I feel like 3 weeks ago I would have been like, oh my god, give me your book, it's everything I need to know. And now I'm like, I still want to read your book, but I get it that there is these adhesions that actually happen at the ligaments that cause this referral pain, that even though I was pain free, if I overused or shifted my symmetry, holy hell did my ligaments tell me. And prior to the car accident, was that before that car accident? Let me think about, yeah, before the car accident, I had carpal tunnel so bad I was wearing two wrists
Mm.
or two braces. I was a volleyball player, a basketball player, and then I got into rowing. And I had overdone my wrist. So before the car accident happened, I already had some adhesions and some inflammation, right? And so I'm sure after the car accident, after I was healed, when I went back to do things, I was like, I'm not gonna re-injure my fascia. I'm not gonna overuse. Golfing was something I liked for a little while. And I was like, no, too much. Bowling. My husband and I loved bowling. I was like, it's creating too much stuff on my right side. I mean, it's really interesting. So I really want you to unpack that, because so many people, this is something people aren't thinking about. I can guarantee you.
Okay. Um, okay, so where to start?
Where to start? I'm
Where
looking
to
for
start?
joy. I mean, here's the question. Is it okay to do something that's only one-sided, that's not symmetrical? And how do we compensate properly so we stay in a healing, symmetrical way? We're not creating adhesions that cause blockades.
So, um, this thing that we live in is already asymmetrical. It's
Oh,
not meant to be symmetrical. Everybody's got one hand bigger than the other, one leg longer than the other, one foot bigger than the other. It's totally normal. Leg length discrepancy isn't statistically significant until it's about 3/4 of an inch.
huh.
Then you might want to throw in a heel lift to improve the quality of your life. Just because you have a leg length discrepancy that's 3/4 of an inch, a lot of people don't know they have that. They don't have any pain. They don't have any discomfort. They don't have any dysfunction. They're living their lives. They're running, hopping, skipping. They're running marathons. They're awesome human beings. So the idea of structure and pain, it's not really connected any longer like what we used to. So that's one of the myths and the trends that are still sort of perpetuated by a number of medical clinicians.
Me up until now. So thanks for
Yeah,
clearing up. Listen, everybody knows, Robert, you have to understand, because you don't know me. I am so willing to be wrong, brother. I am so willing to learn new things. And so is my community, because I certainly haven't figured it all out. I've helped a lot of people and I continue to help people, but
yep.
I want the most efficient, fastest way we can help people. And if it is dumping everything I know, I am open. So Kelly was a dumbass before 5 minutes ago, and now she knows better. Go ahead.
Every day we just live our lives just trying to be less wrong, right? And the quickest, fastest thing that you can do for any of your patients that are walking into your office with any kind of injuries, pathologies, whatever, tell them how awesome everything you see is.
Mm.
If I'm working on, for example, I had a 90-year-old Chinese guy who taught Tai Chi, and
Mhm.
he had been told by every healthcare practitioner that he went to that he had the frozen shoulder.
Mm.
Now he went to them because his shoulder was a little sore. So they planted this idea in his head, and then they told him all of the bad things that was associated with adhesive capsulitis. And they made up a story about his physiology that may or may not have been true. And he lived with this for 8 years. So he comes to me. I tell him how awesome he is. I get him on the table. I'm doing some work, but I'm also testing out the shoulders at the same time. And I'm not holding back. I know what his tissue extensibility is, his pliability is. I've got his arm all the way up, and I'm telling him that his arm is awesome. His tissues are amazing. I told him that he had the shoulder of a 19-year-old. He was like, "What?" I'm like, "You have the shoulder of a 19-year-old. You have full range of motion. There's nothing wrong with your shoulder. You didn't have frozen shoulder. You had cranky shoulder. The shoulder was pissed off. So we got to send it on vacation. So your shoulder is fine. 3 treatments. I haven't seen him since. You
Mm.
get back to normal, back to range of motion. Just tell him how awesome he is." So that's sort of
And it wasn't like you were faking him out, just for those that are listening, because
no,
I have been in pain. I've been to practitioners, and I've had peep and clients as well that have said to me, "Oh, it's just placebo effect and brainwashing." Which, by the way, placebo effect works, and if that works, so great be it. But I agree with brainwashing. We all need a little brainwashing because we have negative thinking. I call it stinking thinking. We need to clean up the thinking. And you're right, somebody died, but I don't want anybody to think Robert didn't treat him. Robert treated him for 3 visits and said, "You do have." He didn't say you had a frozen shoulder, but he did change it and go, "It's cranky." It doesn't
yeah.
mean I'm going to ignore what you're dealing with. And if somebody truly came in with a frozen shoulder, what might you say?
Well, then you've got some adhesive capsulitis. And then I want to know what they've been told about it. And then I will tell them my perspective on it. And yeah, absolutely. You have to be truthful and honest, obviously, with your patients. That's all part of developing a therapeutic relationship with your patients.
Yeah.
And if somebody has a degenerative, chronic, progressive disorder, nothing you say about how awesome they are is going to change that. So you have to be real with your patients. And that's why yourself and myself and others, we've been in practice as long as because we're truthful, we're honest, and we're real.
Yeah. Great.
Okay, so back
Whew.
to
Yeah.
the back to the wrists and the soreness, right?
Yeah.
So the one thing I don't, so like we talked about earlier, at the beginning, is that we have these things called dermatomes. So
Yeah.
dermatome is an area of skin that is innervated by a peripheral nerve that comes from a specific nerve root. We have myotomes, which are muscles or muscle groups that are innervated by a peripheral nerve coming from a nerve root.
Innervated
But
just means matches up with for the layman out there. Just so you know, it just means like connects to.
yeah, you've got a C5 nerve root that becomes a peripheral nerve with a specific name, and then it goes and it attaches onto skin and muscle tissue. But your joint capsules and your ligamentous tissues are all innervated also. And the only people that really get that type of information are regional anesthesiologists and some chiropractors.
Hmm.
So I went through and I thought, this is interesting because a lot of the stuff that we treat are joint issues. We've got rheumatoid arthritis, we've got osteoarthritis, we've got dislocations, we've got separations, we've got sprains, strains, and airplanes of all different degrees of injuries. We've got post-surgery, we've got knee replacements, we've got shoulder replacements, disc replacements now. These things got to be innervated. So I went through and I did a research project, and I grabbed all of the evidence-informed published research on the neurological innervations for the axial and the peripheral joint tissues. So everything through the vertebral column and everything through your periphery. So
So
now
I break things down because you're
yep,
really smart and I want to keep it. So your spine, okay, and your arms and your legs.
yep.
So
So
peripheral is arms and legs, and spine is your axiom, your skeleton, your main skeleton.
yeah, so vertebrae,
Sacrum,
rib cage,
rib,
pelvis, sacrum.
shoulder girdle.
So I now have a complete database of all of the joints and ligaments in the body, all of the nerves that innervate those joints and ligaments, and all the nerve roots that where they all come from. So this
Wow.
is one research paper that I've done. And then from there,
Get that research paper, Robert.
it's actually a paper in progress right now, but I just presented the poster on this. I can show you the poster actually if we share screen.
Yeah, sure, go for it. I would love that. That's awesome information.
Oh, yes, I will
Did I give you
share
permission to share?
this. Yep.
Okay, cool.
Now, okay, so here we have. You can see this
Yes.
arthroptome,
Yes.
joint capsule ligamentous
Arthroptome. You created
arthrotomes.
arthrotomes.
So an
Oh my
arthropome is
God,
actually
that's so cool.
a surgical tool, but I'm redefining the term. So it's being redefined as the joint capsule ligamentous tissue supplied by nerve fibers from specific dorsal roots.
That's
So
amazing.
so we did the project, have gone through, and for example, your axial spine. So you've got your axial spine for the cervical spine. So for the neck, we've got the nerve root, the nerves, all the tissues that are innervated, and then I had images created in order to reflect the research. And then for shoulders, because come back here. Most people are interested in the shoulders because they've got shoulder discomfort. So
Yeah.
we have all of these ligaments, right? So through
Yep.
the
Wow.
shoulder, through the glenohumeral joint, we've got all these nerves that are all here. And these are all the nerve roots. So for example, your sternoclavicular joint, right? Your sternoclavicular joint in the front, it comes from C3 to 5 and 5 to 6. These are the nerves. These are the tissues that are innervated by it.
Hmm.
Even all the way down to the bone, your clavicle and the humerus, they're also innervated. So
Hmm.
this is just one of the projects that we did. We know that we have those mechanoreceptors that relay balance, coordination, kinesthetic awareness. They connect through to the nerves. They go to your spine. They go to your brain. They provide you with your sense of reality. So that's one of the things. So connecting this to pain and discomfort. because we know that now some people, when they sprain a joint, they have pain. Some people don't. Um, there are specific pain referral patterns that have all been documented with research. I've gone through and I've documented all of that into a database. We know how referred pain happens. That's what I can do. I can ask your viewers and you, how does referred pain happens? Because there's a lot of really interesting Walt Disney bedtime stories about how referred pain occurs.
I
And
would
a
love
lot
to,
of people they don't know. So we talked about
because
the
that's getting
nerve.
important for them to understand the fascia. Yeah.
Yes.
And
So
that's a good point of connection for them to understand. Because honestly, I've had a lot of people comment to me out in the world as I've gone to seminars, and people are like, I really tried to promote your fascia summit, but people don't know what fascia is. I'm like, that's why we had to do a summit because
yes.
nobody knows what the fascia is, and it's so freaking important. And referral pain, I mean, I can't get people. And what you said earlier about acute injury, it's like, get ready for your referral pain if you haven't handled your acute injury. That's all I can say.
Yeah. So a lot of people think that referred pain happens in specific tissues, and it all happens, somewhere, in the periphery, in the fingers or in the wrist or something like that. But what's really interesting is that the research says that it doesn't happen in that tissue. So remember I said all those tissues are innervated, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So we have 7 key features of referred pain. This is documented research. This was put out by a professor, Thomas Graven Nielsen. He's a professor down in the States. This is his research. This isn't made up. This isn't my stuff. This is his. He's done the research. It's his published research. So we have these nerve roots, these dorsal root ganglions is what they're called.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have an injury to a wrist or to a ligament, it sensitizes or it lights up the peripheral nerve that then goes to that nerve root, and it lights that nerve root. Now, there's a little bit of an inflammatory soup that is created around that nerve root. All right. So let's say we've got like a C3 that gets kind of cranky and pissed off with that inflammatory soup. Now, that inflammatory soup has been documented to be able to migrate anywhere between 3 and 6 levels. So C3 is cranky and inflamed, but now also is C6.
Mm,
Now C3 innervates this tissue, C6 innervates that tissue. So there's your referred pain.
gotcha.
So it's felt distant, it's semi-directional, it goes one way. It's a deeper sensation, so it really feels like it's in the bone or it feels like it's in the joint. It needs a higher stimulus, which means if I sprain my shoulder and then about 4 weeks later my wrist hurts,
Mm-hmm.
I can press on the wrist all I want. It's not going to piss it off. It's not going to hurt it. But as soon as I press on the shoulder, then the wrist hurts.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah.
that's a referred pain, right? So it's delayed because it takes time for that inflammation to migrate. So it takes time for the wrist to get sore. And we have those patients that say, I sprained my shoulder, but it wasn't until about 6 weeks later that my wrist hurt. It takes that long for that inflammation to migrate.
Hmm.
So it's delayed, and then it diminishes before the local pain, which means that as we're healing and the inflammation is being reabsorbed in those nerve roots like C6 and C5 and C4, they become desensitized. So they get turned off. The wrist diminishes before the shoulder does. And that's referred pain. It comes from the nerve roots and that inflammatory soup that migrates around those nerve roots. So
And
it's in
number
the nervous system.
and the number
And
7 is stimulus at the referred pain site isn't needed.
right. So
And
that's same
talk
as
about
with
the phantom
phantom
limb
lip
pain
pain.
to me is super interesting when it comes to fascia and the energy and how we connect to the biofield around us and all the things. So, can we unpack number 7 for a minute?
Sure, yeah. So you have to remember that in our central nervous system, we have a digital hard drive that contains all the information about every body part that we have. And so this also ties into, we have patients that say, oh, well, my back went out, right? My back has gone out.
Yes.
Where did it go? Did it go for milk and bread and butter?
I say that all the time.
Right? Where did it go? Did it just like pop out when you bent forwards? Um, so we have these, let me get you, there it is. We have these mechanoreceptors, these joint mechanoreceptors, and they're also in every other tissue. They're in the skin, they're in the muscle tissue, they're in the fascial tissue, lots of different kinds of mechanoreceptors. So these mechanoreceptors, through the peripheral nervous system, connect to your spinal cord. They go up into your primary motor cortex, primary sensory cortex, and they relay balancing, coordination, and muscle function and everything, right? Nociception, discomfort. And when there's a disruption that happens because of some type of injury, maybe, or sensitization that occurs, there's a discommunication that occurs between the primary sensory area and these mechanoreceptors. So the primary sensory area is like, we haven't heard from these guys for a while. I wonder where they are. I guess they're not a part of the body. I guess they must be outside of the body because they're not in the body because we haven't heard from them for a while. So they're outside the body. And that's where that term, it went out. It went out to get some bread and butter and some milk. So then you get a healthcare professional that comes along. You've got a good therapeutic relationship with the healthcare professional. They use some positive terminology. They tell you how awesome you are. They do some type of technique, be it manual therapy or active rehab or acupuncture or something that makes the tissue feel better, stimulates the tissue, diminishes a little bit of that localized neurological inflammation. You get a reconnection of the communication between the periphery and the mechanoreceptors to the primary sensory cortex. Suddenly they're back in. I don't know what you did. You did something. You put my back in. You did the adjustment at the chiropractor. You did the massage at the massage therapist. You did some acupuncture at the physio or at the acupuncturist or physiatrist. You put it back in. So that's how the in and out happens.
Interesting.
So yeah, the phantom limb pain. So we have this digital memory in our primary sensory cortex, and it still thinks that you have that part of your body. So that's where that disconnect comes from. So there you go.
Why do you think that happens? Why do you think that the brain still thinks that that's there? I mean, there's no feedback loop at this point, but the receptors are still feeding information as though it's there.
Well, if the part's not there, the receptors aren't there, but the body still thinks that it's there. It's still looking for it. So that's just sort of a simplification for phantom limb pain, but
right. And so if fascia is the frequency fabric, as Gil calls it, which is my new favorite terminology, one of them.
He just did a cool video on tissues and frequencies, endocrine system and frequencies.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
Like on YouTube?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Cool. I'll go find it. Thank you. And we'll all go find it. We'll put a link here at the bottom of this podcast. But if it's the frequency fabric, right? And the fabric holds our frequency that's connecting our frequency into the frequency around us, because we all know that we live in frequency, that everything is a vibration and a frequency, and that the biofield around us has a frequency, and our body is connecting into that biofield. And I'm not saying that you necessarily have the answer. I just find it super interesting. So, like, what is happening in the etherics that the body still can feel that pain? Because I know that's so real for so many people that have had limbs removed or organs removed, for that matter, that they feel as though the pain has not changed. And gallbladders, I know a ton of clients that get gallbladders removed and then they still have the gallbladder pain.
You're reading my mind. I have a patient right now. 8 weeks ago, she had her gallbladder removed. She still has gallbladder pain. So she has phantom organ pain,
right,
which is a thing. Yep.
which is a thing.
She had
Information is in the
organ
field.
discomfort. She had organ discomfort for about 2 years. That peripheral nerve that innervates that organ, it got sensitized. Just because you took the organ out doesn't mean that you're desensitizing the nerve. The nerve has learned and has been sensitized so that the signal gets sent. It self generates this signal, and then we cognitively, emotionally, psychologically, thoughts, beliefs, and expectations, we will perceive this as pain or discomfort of some kind. And once it gets perpetuated for such a long time, it takes a while to sort of turn the volume down on the system.
Well, the whole self-generating thing, let's like it's self-generating, but from the information that's in our field. Because until we clean up in the information that's being signaled to the body, that's sending the signals through the fascia and being held on through the lymph and holding in the structure bar, and then signaling the cells to behave in a certain way, till we start fixing the field, it's not going to fix in our body. And on our previous podcast, I got my sonic slider for some reason, cleaning up my field for some reason, as we say this, but that's what I experience, is that all that pain that and not to go through that story again, but when I was going in and out of meditations, having pain, not having pain over the last couple of years, and trying to figure out what the hell, why am I chasing this pain after 20 years? Well, I got to a deeper layer, and no longer am I worried about my backpack on one side or the other, sleeping on one side or the other. I mean, the last 2 weeks of my life has been like, oh my God, I'm not the princess in the pea anymore, because I cleaned up the energy field that was causing me to not want, that was causing the resistance, that was causing the pain. Experience in the physical body as pain and resistance, but it was really a resistance I had in the field about stepping into who I really am and being able to spread my arms and hold people. It's a whole long thing, but I'm sure you get it.
Yep.
And I just invite you all to understand, once again, that we are not just our physical beings. We are this incredibly immense spiritual being having a physical experience. And that if you have pain in your body, it started in the emotional world first, because we are emotional beings having a physical experience. And that when you are gifted with finding yourself amazing practitioners like Robert that know this and feel this in the body, your healing can be quantum, meaning it can be instantaneous. It can be like that once it's released from the fascia, which is holding all of this information that's being signaled back and forth in this bidirectional system, which is why gallbladder might happen to be in charge of resentment, frustration, the emotions. And so the Zen master would ask, has that person that you're dealing with, and hopefully she's not listening to this, we're not trying to out her or anything, but has she dealt with the resentment and the frustration in her life? Because that's what really causes the gallbladder pain. It's not from eating fatty foods or your bile production. We would say that the bile production and the bile storage isn't going well because of your stinking thinking.
Well, and we all know that when we're going through some type of challenging experience that is very stressful, your discomfort levels, they climb, they elevate, to the point where, for example, we have chickenpox. Chickenpox lays dormant in your dorsal root ganglions, which we talked about earlier. And when you are under an immense amount of stress is the trigger, you'd suddenly develop shingles. It's the same chickenpox virus. It just got stimulated in the dorsal root ganglion because of the experience that you're going through. We've seen that a number of times. And you touched on something about being able to have an immediate effect on somebody's discomfort. I have a friend who was treating a gentleman. The gentleman had about 15 years beforehand had a car accident, didn't have a seatbelt on, went through the windscreen, and he impacted a tree, and it crushed his face. Tons of surgery, plates, pins, nuts, bolts, meshes, wires, everything. 15 years later, he does something, sprains his ankle or something like that, and his ankle is just in just terrible pain. And my friend says, "So your ankle's in terrible pain, but you had this car accident from 15 years ago that was really, really that was quite involved. So your face must just is it painful all the time?" And the guy's like, "No, my face doesn't hurt at all." He's like, "Well, if you had all that trauma to your face, why does your ankle hurt?" And the guy's like, "Huh, I never thought of that." Now, you and I, we know that structure and pain aren't connected, but to him it was. And until that seed that was planted of there's a disconnect, he'd never perceived that before. And suddenly he's like, my ankle feels about 75% better just from talking to you. So again, like we talked about earlier, the narratives, the terminologies, the thoughts, beliefs, and expectations that we can work with our patients.
I appreciate giving that credit, but I only made that shift in this podcast. And I would tell you that the universe is constantly making me laugh and always making me smile. If I had heard those words 3 weeks ago, or ideally 30 years ago, that structure does not cause pain, that has been a belief system of mine. I have absolutely been in the belief system that you have to have perfect symmetry in order to have painlessness. Yet, all the things you said that I know are true, I've got two legs that aren't the same length. I got 2 feet that's not the same length. My eyes aren't exactly the same. My nose is a little crazy. And I learned this in anatomy and physiology. I had just forgotten it, that nobody is symmetrical. And yet, I have been in this rigid, I have to go, and I was like, I can't wear a backpack unless it's exactly the same. I can't sleep on one side of the pillow or the other. I got to use my neck nurse every time I sleep. And I released that 3 weeks ago unknowingly, didn't put it into those terminologies, but that is as simple as it is. Structure and structural issues do not denote pain. That is a huge belief system. That was mine until an hour ago. And is 51 minutes ago, that was my belief system. It is not my belief system anymore. And
Now,
as quick as my belief system changes is as quick as that will change. Go ahead. You were going to say something else.
now, what we're not saying is we're not saying that the people that come to us in discomfort and pain after having some type of structural event happen to them, that it's all in their head, or they're
Correct.
lying, or they're making it up, or anything. Because some of us have had serious injuries and a lot of physical fractures and trauma that have occurred. And I can tell you, it hurts. It freaking hurts. And it impacts your quality of life and your sleep and your thoughts, beliefs, and expectations. I'm not just a therapist, but I'm also a patient.
Yeah.
And we're not saying that structure never causes discomfort or pain. It can definitely be the stimulus that is, in the part of the equation of how that happens. But we have a lot of military that are in terrible situations,
Yeah.
that have to save their buddies and their friends that are in the trenches.
Yeah.
And I've had some patients in the military that they got shot like 8 times,
Yeah.
and they still pulled out 5 of their guys and girls in their platoon and didn't know that they got shot until they were, somebody's like, "Hey, what's that red stuff coming out of you?" Right. I've got a couple of UFC fighters that I treat. And one guy won his match, and while he was being interviewed, the interviewer was like, "Hey, dude, your toe is like broken," and his toe was like going out that way. He's like, "Oh, I don't even feel it."
Ian is a martial artist of 25 years. His toes are so, and I should have learned this lesson with him. I look at his toes all the time and I'm like, how do you walk around? I don't understand. I don't think his pinkies have touched the ground in 20 years. Or 40 years. He's broken the pinkies and the second toe so many times. These toes are going in this direction from kicking trees because that was his training.
Yep.
And I agree with you. And I want them to all, and I appreciate you highlighting that. We're not saying that your pain isn't real. But as your
No.
Zen master, I'm going to ask you what caused you to be in the position that you were in that car when you got in the car accident. What caused you to, Kelly, to play basketball with professional athletes to the point where you broke your leg because somebody fell on you? What lesson were you trying to learn? What caused me to break my arm to do a muck fest and all the situation that around it? Yeah, it hurt when I broke my arm, but it also lended a whole bunch of expansion in my life when that pain was alleviated and that arm was no longer broken, because I was a new mom that felt like she could do it all on her own and realized at some level how exhausted she was. And all the EBV in my body was absolutely expressing itself after that pregnancy. And when I broke my arm and Ian had to do so much of the work, I realized I was not in this alone. And I don't know if I ever realized that if I didn't have only one arm. So that broken arm brought me such enlightenment, as did the broken leg, as did the broken back. And I put myself, I would argue at this point in my life, in a position to have that healing. I have now made a contract with the universe that I no longer need to experience physical pain to have a spiritual expansion.
Yep.
And I recommend all of you have that same agreement with God in the universe, that you no longer, I don't do physical pain in order to create spiritual growth in my life anymore. Thank the God and the Lord and all the people and all the angels and all of the beings. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Because I definitely lived that for way too long.
Yep.
And structure. So anyway, this is thank you so much. This is so fascinating. Okay, so what else do you want to tell them about the fascia?
So
I mean,
we were
great
talking
things.
just one
Are
little bit
we
about
great?
those full contact gardeners. So we have our ladies, guys and gals that go out and they full contact garden for 12 hours because it's sunny and you got to get it done and it's going to rain tomorrow. And
Yep.
they can't understand why, and a lot of so therapists get frustrated and patients get frustrated because look at, I'm at like 6 or 8 weeks and I'm still in discomfort. I'm still in pain. I'm still guarding. My low back still feels like it's going to go out every time I roll over in bed. Why is that? I'm going to share screen for a second. So this again is evidence-informed published research on healing times and healing that occurs in joint capsule ligaments tissues. So when we have those repetitive challenges, let me go to this slide. So we have normal range. We have a deformation that occurs in the elastic range, right? Typically, you have full recovery in these sort of areas.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get into that, that sixth, seventh, eighth hour of full contact gardening and rotating and stuff, then you start getting into some creep, some hysteresis, some tension that develops. You start getting some permanent deformation. You might get a little tissue rupture, a little bit of failure that happens. And this is where all of that inflammatory process starts to set in place.
What's
And that,
creep, Robert? Sorry to interrupt. What's creep?
so creep is as you lengthen you can think of creep as if you take an elastic band and you tie a weight to it. And what'll happen is that that elastic band will get taken up with a lot of stress and tension. But then over time, that weight will actually increase in length.
Yeah.
So over the course of an hour, that weight will touch the ground, whereas in 5 minutes, it's back up here. So that's creep. So
Okay.
that's still considered tissue injury.
Yeah.
Um, so when the ligaments and the joint capsules go through this, they go past this yield point, you get some permanent deformation, you get some failure, you get some inflammatory process that happens. Then we have a ligamental muscular reflex, a protective mechanism that comes into play in order to stabilize the area and protect it and guard it. Now, there's your stiffness, there's your lack of range of motion, there's your hypomobility, all of that. And this is all documented research. Again, we've gone through, pulled all the research. We know which ligaments are reflexly connected to which muscles. For example, in the knee, we've got ACL, PCL, MCLs, LCLs, and we have all the connections through to the hamstrings, the quadriceps, the gastrocs. So we all know this, that when we sprain our ankle, suddenly your calf tightens up, your peroneals on the side of the calf tighten up, the hamstrings tighten up, and they stay like that for months, sometimes years. And it's this ligamental muscular reflex that just grips on and tries to protect it, thinks that there's a threat, so it holds on to it.
Hmm.
Going back to the full contact gardening and why am I still sore 6 weeks later? So the research shows that for every 10 to 60 minutes of creeper tension, full contact gardening, it takes about 24 to 48 hours of full recovery. So it takes 20 to 40 times longer than
Holy cow.
the duration of the activity. So if you have, let's say, for every hour, it takes 2 days to start to feel good, and you did it for 8 hours. So that's 20.
64 days.
Yeah. So that's 16, that's 2 weeks
Wow.
until you start to feel better.
I mean, I guess we really do know that. Like, that's why in athletic training, you do the, we're going to work out the upper body, then the lower body. You got to give a day of rest because you're tearing down muscles, and then you got to, let them recover. But you're right with this. What I mean, we just moved our house after 12 years
Yep.
living in one house, and we moved into a 4-story house. And the amount of soreness that him and I are experiencing, lifting and carrying boxes up and down. And he's like, I don't understand why I can't wait to go home and tell him, like, babe, this is why. And he did it longer than I did because 2 days after we moved, I left for 12 days. So he's been continuing to do it and
Yep.
not giving himself a break. And so I need to say to him, like, if you've been doing that for 14 days, he's got to take like 24, another 28 days. He's got to take 30 days off to allow his body to recover, which is why instinctively I said to him this morning, I don't care if all the boxes just stay where they are until the end of the year. Like, we just need to feel settled and not feel like we're moving boxes anymore. Like, this is
Yep.
too much.
The
So,
one thing that we know is that immobility actually is more detrimental to the fascia and the nervous system and our psychology and everything. So with my people that full contact garden, or my elite athletes that are Olympic athletes that they can't take time off, then what we do is we say, okay, well, if I can't get you to stop, maybe we can just get you to slow down a little bit. So maybe for a couple of training sessions, or maybe for 3 or 4 days, you're still active and you're still happy and you're still doing the activity that you love to do, but you're just not doing it to the point where you're challenging those barriers, where you're sensitizing the nervous system, where you're stimulating more development of the inflammatory process. So still go and move, still do all the things you love to do, but just, do a little bit less just for this little pocket of time. And then once you feel better, then you start to slowly, graded exposure, get back to what you're doing beforehand. So yeah, I still want people moving.
right. And that's a very good point. So, because that's what I noticed, and I'm glad you brought that up. Like, I stopped myself from doing a lot of these things that we talked about for joy because I didn't want to create this imbalance in my structure, which now I care less about. Um, but it's also like giving the body time to recover when doing that work, I think is the key. And so that's number one. And any other like unwinding or advice for people that do have a repetitive job maybe, or something that they can't control, like, hey, I just have to do that 8 hours a day. Like, I know when I go to the grocery store, I see a lot of people wearing those braces because they're doing this all day
Yeah.
long. Like,
Yeah.
they have to keep their job, they got to do that, but what else could they do? I mean, I've often said to them when I'm standing in line, hey, use your left hand for a while. Just bounce out a little bit, see if it helps.
Yeah, it's challenging when you get the people where, their life and putting food on the table is dependent upon that repetitive activity. Um, Unfortunately, we now know the ergonomics of those braces actually cause more issues long term than we thought that they did. So what I will do is I will try to find an activity that the patient likes to do that isn't going to challenge the tissue in a different way, but isn't going to sensitize it. Also, I'm going to reframe how they think about the term stretching and how they stretch, because it's quite different from how we used to think about it. We used to think that when you stretch, you're actually lengthening tissue, you're changing tissue. We now know that that doesn't happen. If you want to, for example, this is research, you've got Robert Libbey that is on the fascia conference with you. So this was in a fascia and sports medicine DVD that he put out probably about a decade ago. Fascia will change over the course of a year if you are active with it and repetitive with it about 4 times a week. So that's how fascia will change, not from massage therapists or manual therapists, gripping and twisting and turning and that kind of stuff with it. So your fascia can definitely change. It just takes time. It takes a lot longer than what you think it is. And so for stretching, we don't change tissue. Well, then how do I go from not being able to stick my arm behind my back to being able to stick it way behind my back? How does that happen? So this happens with the nervous system. So the nervous system is always assessing danger and safety, threat and safety, and it instills those muscular protective guarding mechanisms that then resist or restrict range of motion. So with the old way of stretching, if you hold it for 30 seconds, 90 seconds, they've actually got research where they held a hamstring stretch for 9,000 seconds.
Wow.
It made no difference whatsoever. It actually caused more restricted range of motion than previously. So you have to retrain the nervous system. So the nervous system needs to be educated that this range of motion is safe and not threatening or dangerous. So we do that by doing, I do it with like 3 to 5 second stretches, just 3 to 5 seconds, just to the point where, it's challenging, and then you come off of it, and then you go right back into it, 3 to 5 seconds, and then you come off of it. And what that does is it educates the nervous system of, hey, we're not too sure about this range. Oh, well, that was okay. That was safe. We could do that again. And then you do it again. And within the shortest amount of time, like a minute, you've got full range of motion. I do this in practice every day with my patients. I've got patients that they've got no range of.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Your information has to be out there everywhere. Like I'm like, dude, if I had met you 23 years ago, my journey would have been a lot faster.
I've got some patients where they're like, if I'd had this 20 years ago when I went for this type of surgery, it would have just been a complete game changer. So now that I'm going for this other kind of surgery, can we start doing this stuff now? Yeah. And then, maybe my outcomes will be better afterwards. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, so just changing how the people stretch changes how the wrist feels.
And it all comes down to be easy on yourself.
Absolutely.
Be allowance instead of forcing. I did yoga, Bikram's yoga, in my home for 10 years on and off up to the point of injury because I was trying to force those positions. And if you hear some background noise, they're doing some fascia releasing in the background. Nice. When I started to get into yoga, there's
sounds like a SER technique.
Therapeutic work happening in the other room right now. So welcome to True Wellness. And we do it by biomimicry. So we're doing it with them to get them to understand how to express out of the tissues how we really feel. This is so healing for this woman. It is going to be so incredible when she walks out of the room. So you're all benefiting from her. And she's going to really enjoy that she was in the background of this podcast. But when I started to do yoga from the perspective of exactly what you said, only go to the point where you feel good and allow it, my entire practice changed, my flexibility changed, and I stopped hurting myself. And it really came about self love, which is what
Yep.
the Beats is really about. You know, when I started this podcast, it started because I realized people didn't know how their body worked. And my good friend Heidi, who passed in January of 20, when she is the one that put this landing page together for me in 19 and said, you need to start a podcast. She said, because you understand how the body works, but you come so much from your heart. And you really want people to understand that how they heal is with love. Even though you've done all the medicine, you've done all the injections, all the IVs, all the things. And really, it's about self love. What I've really come to terms with is that if we don't love ourselves better than we love anybody else, we are going to experience pain. Life has its ups and downs, but through that, you have to show up for you every single day and love on yourself and give yourself, you're doing great. You're doing awesome. Listen, some of you are living in pain and agony and can't function. You're doing great. You woke up today. You championed on another day. You found it in your soul to wake up and to start anew. You got this. And by simply loving on yourself and letting go of the stories that people have told you and expressing them and loving more and more on yourself is how we heal and how we connect to others. That I've never met this man before. 2 minutes before we started this podcast, and feel the love between us because we are truly heart-centered people that know ourselves and therefore can easily give love to others. It's so easy to love Robert because it's so easy to love myself because I've faced all of it and love all the dark places as well as the lights and just willing to face it. And I invite you to do the same. And I invite you to unwind your case and love on yourself in all these ways that Robert has taught us today. Please, Robert, take the stage if there's anything else you would like to share with our community.
Just you know, just to let people know that they have an amazing ability to change their life. They need to find someone like yourself or myself that also believes in them, someone that is willing to develop this, this positive therapeutic relationship, being honest with them and just supporting them along the journey. There's lots of times where patients come in and they say, I know I had this appointment booked and you're hard to get in to see, and I didn't want to cancel it because it was short notice, but I don't know if I don't know if I want to get touched today. I don't know if I'm in that spot. It's like, well, here in Canada, we have what's called informed consent. And if I don't have informed consent, then I can't touch you. Now, I'm not a counselor, not a psychiatrist, not a psychologist. I can't give you any advice, but I can sit and listen. And a lot of therapists, they won't do that. They won't just take the hour and just sit and listen. So, like I said, redefining the term SCAR: strong, capable, adaptable, and resilient. And scars are on the outside, scars are on the inside.
So true. And we pray that today, while we've answered some questions and he's got some great pearls, it also has encouraged you to find out more about the fascia. And we are doing this fascia and chronic pain rescue summit starting October 24th. There's a link for you to be able to register for that. I do encourage you to purchase it because you're going to want all the 50 interviews and the master classes, because
That's awesome.
this is the
Your
new.
lineup is awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I mean,
it really is. It's world
I
class.
appreciate that. Siobhan and I worked our little heinies off to get what we see as the experts, both in our medicine and in the field of fascia, to get people to understand how medicine and fascia are related. Because for me, and I said this to John Barnes and his whole organization, that the work they're doing is so impactful. You know, myofascial release and John Barnes's technique is incredible technique. My issue is that it's physical therapists and occupational therapists that know about it. The medical community talks about the emotions in the train, in my world, bioregulatory medicine, and the emotions in the train, but they want to do IVs and injections and equipment, and nobody's touching the body and nobody's doing the body work. And these two worlds have to come together. And I am so excited about this lineup because I feel like we've got a good combination of the two and getting people to understand physical, spiritual, and emotional. But thank you for the kudos. And I encourage you all to and invite you all to partake in next week's summit of the fascia and share it with your friends that are dealing with any illness, honestly. I mean, we say it's about chronic pain, but it's really all the things because it is the thing that's connecting all the things and connecting us to all the things.
Yeah. And we know that that lack of mobility and injury, thoughts, beliefs, expectations, different effects from pharmaceuticals, lack of movement, poor diet and nutrition all contribute to a thickening of fascial tissue in various parts of the body, depending on the person, which then contributes to a loss of elasticity, a loss of pliability. Gil will probably talk about the perifascial fascial tissues that secrete hyaluronic acid that create the sliding and the gliding between the layers of the fascial tissues. That all stops when that densification, that protective mechanism, that armoring, it's an armoring process, occurs in the body. And it's for those of us like yourself and myself where we need to educate our patients and rehydrate that tissue and get it sliding and gliding, get it moving. It all contributes to improving quality of life and decreasing dysfunction and discomfort. So yeah, the fascial conference is going to be absolutely fantastic for you guys.
Thank you. And thank you so much for your time today, your wisdom, your education. Just for those of you who don't know, Robert has written a book. Do you by chance have it in front of you? It's called
Yep.
Ligaments, Pain, and Referral. Yeah, thank you. Ligaments, Pain, Referral Pain. So yeah, it's kind of
This is
weird.
not working.
But there you go,
There
right
it
there.
is.
That's perfect. Ligament pain and referral patterns. So you can check that out. Where can they purchase it on Amazon or something like that? Or can we put a
Ligament ligamentpain.com.
Okay, perfect. Ligamentpain.com. And they can find you at ligamentpain.com as well as last site, site.ca for Canada. Um, and you do see clients in Canada. What part of Canada are you?
I'm in Vancouver. Yep.
Okay.
Still
So
treating.
so if you're in Vancouver area, please come and see him and all my doctor friends that are listening to this refer out to him and find out who he knows in your area because he's a very well connected guy. Pun intended for the fascia because we're all connected with the fascia.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate everybody's time and attention today. And I agree with Robert that none of what I do every day, none of what we do every day matters if you aren't on the other side listening and sharing this. So I applaud you for the time, the energy it takes to listen to podcasts and to get informed and for your own self and for the people that you love. And I appreciate your time. And I appreciate your consideration of the fascia. And I invite you to go dive in deep as we have with fascia. It is a very fun world, and this is the best time to be alive. And more information and education is available to you of the truth than ever before. And you have found the truth with the fascia. So thank you again, Robert, for your time. Thank you all. Anything else, parting words you'd like to say, Robert?
No, just thank you so much for doing this for me. Like I said, I saw the ad go across Facebook and I thought I have to contribute to that. There's people that are in discomfort and dysfunction that I've got some information that can help them, and that's why I reached out to you. So so thank you to everybody for being here. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. From our hearts to yours. This is The Beats with Kelly Kennedy. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much for listening today to this episode of The Beats. And as your host, Kelly Kennedy, truly from my heart to yours, thank you for your time and your attention today. And if this did resonate with you, please do leave some comments. We would love to hear from you. And if this further you think would resonate with somebody that you know, please do go ahead and share that and hit that notification button so you know when The Beats is available to you. We do some live things every once in a while. And as always, we pray that this information today was not only foundational, but raised some questions for you and helped you be empowered to take actionable, profound steps toward regeneration, because your body is the only thing that heals. And that is our message here on The Beats. Thanks again for listening and for sharing. Have a great day.